Hello! Today's video is just something I'm doing for myself. I want to say sorry if my camera angle keeps changing. I'm filming this at the end, but my memory is really messed up, so I keep having to reset my camera, so you might see varying amounts of window in the back because of the way I'm sitting. Now, I super love the author JULIET MARILLIER'S. She's probably my most favorite author of all time. I definitely think if you're like looking at a body of work, I've read every single thing that she's written. And I don't think I can say that about any other author that's written as many books as she has. So I thought it'd be fun today to rank her series because the majority of her books are written as part of a series. She does have a couple standalone titles, and I'm not going to talk about those today, though I have talked about her book Heart's Blood in I think my Wintry Reads video, which I will link in the description if you want to check out my review on that. It's excellent as well. It's just not part of a series. She has 7 series total, and most of them have 3 books. One has 6 books. One has 2 books. And 2 are YA series, the rest are adult. They are all fantasy series with strong romantic elements. Most of them take place in Ireland/Scotland, but not all of them. And I think all of them, now I'm trying to remember, have sort of like fae creatures involved in the story. So we're going to start with my least favorite series and go up to my most favorite series. Which my most favorite series is going to be really obvious if any of you are JULIET MARILLIER'S fans, because I think we all have the same favorite series. Maybe not. I'm filming in a weird spot today because it was way easier for me to come sit over here next to my entire shelf of JULIET MARILLIER's books rather than bring this entire shelf over there where I usually film. So my least favorite series to start with is this one, which I think is called the Shadowfell series. Yes, it is. It's called the Shadowfell series. So this is a young adult fantasy series, and it follows Naren, and she is magical in a time when you really don't want to be magical. She is a caller, meaning that she can call to fae creatures and they will come to her. And there is an evil king who at the time is killing people, not killing them, but like making them lose their minds if they have any magic powers that to do with the fae. So she and a group of friends are trying to overthrow him while also keeping her safe. So it's Shadowfell is the first one, and then Ravenflight is the second, and then the third one is The Caller. This one I just didn't really love. I thought it was fine. I read them all, and I thought they were all kind of fine. I'm not as big of a YA fantasy reader anymore by the time this one came out. So these books came out in 2012, 2013, 2014, and by then I was kind of off reading YA fantasy. I had read so much YA fantasy in like the early 2000s that I really wasn't into it anymore, and I really liked adult fantasy more, so I just didn't love this series, but I thought they were all fine. I mean, I would recommend them to people who love YA fantasy, just they're not very adult. These also came out when like YA fantasy was really starting to sort of take over like the market in more of like a general way. Like so many people who didn't read, who weren't within the YA age group were reading YA fantasy. So I'm not super surprised that she wrote a YA fantasy series considering she was already, you know, a pretty well established and Asian fantasy author. My second least favorite series, which is just weird to say because I do like all of these. So this is number 6 out of 7 is The Warrior Bards, this is the series that just finished. So the first one is The Harp of Kings, and then we have A Dance with Fate, and then A Song of Flight. This is was kind of a weird one for me to rank, and I do feel a little guilty about putting it this far down, but while I loved A Dance with Fate, the middle one, I didn't love The Harp of Kings or A Song of Flight, number 1 and number 3. I'll tell you why. So this series is a spinoff of another series that's higher up in my rankings, and it's about Levin, Dow, and Brock, who are 3 young adults training to become sort of like warrior spies who disguise themselves as bards to get into like castles and stuff like that. So Levin and Brock are siblings. They're adopted siblings. Brock was adopted by Levin's parents, and Dow is the son of a relatively evil lord. And they all meet in this training facility for people that want to basically become spies. Each book follows a different plot line having to do with a different like powerful house in, this is like fantasy Ireland, and it also follows the invasion of the Crowfolk, which is like this new fae type creature that's now living among them and extremely violent, and they can't figure out where they came from or what's going on with them. This has a romance that runs through all 3 books that I did like, and I did like how it ended up in the last one, but it just didn't like grab me as much as some of the other series did. But it's still a good series. It's still a fun read. You just have a slow book 1 and kind of a slow book 3, but a fantastic book 2. My 5th favorite series by Juliet Marillier is the Wildwood Dancing series. So Wildwood Dancing is the first book, and the second book is Sybil's Secret, though I'm not sure if it's pronounced Sybil or Kybele. I think it's Sybil, but to me it looks like Kybele. So this is kind of a weird series because I absolutely loved Wildwood Dancing and I really didn't like Sybil's Secret. Again, this is a YA one, so I tend to be a little less likely to love YA fantasy rather than adult. Wildwood Dancing is a fairy tale retelling in 2 parts. It's a fairy tale retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, but also of the Frog Prince. So in this one, we have 5 sisters, Tati, Jenna, Ulia, Paula, and Stella. And it takes place in Romania. And they are able to sort of cross into this other world in the evening to go dancing. And Tati falls in love with someone there who seems like he might be kind of dangerous. At the same time, Jenna has this frog that can speak to her that lives with her, and they have this weird relationship. But I really liked this one. I like the magic in it. I like the Romanian setting. I know Juliet Marillier went to Romania to prepare to write this book, and the setting is great and really well done. The sequel / companion, because I don't think you necessarily need to read this one first, follows Paula, who's the second youngest sister. And I'll be honest, I don't really remember that much about this book because I really didn't like it, so it didn't stick with me. She goes to Istanbul, and she's like looking for Sybil's gift, which I think is like this artifact. I remember there's a lot to do with bees in here. This one just was my favorite. You can tell because I have the advanced reader's copy, which this came out when I worked at an indie bookstore, and I used to get actual like advanced reader's copies like this, hard ones, not just on my Kindle. And I kept it, but I didn't buy the book, which usually if it's a book I really love, I'll go ahead and buy it because ARCs don't really stand up very well. I mean, it is a paperback, but like the covers get kind of damaged more often. But something cool I did notice when I pulled this down, which I completely forgot, is that this is autographed, which I've never met her, but because I was such a huge fan and this came out when I worked at the bookstore, I'm sure our rep from, I think this is Knopf, got me an autographed copy, which was nice. They used to do fun stuff like that for me. Okay, so now we're going to get into the series that I like really loved. So my 4th favorite series is the Bride Chronicles, and I'm missing the middle book. So it's The Dark Mirror and then The Blade of Fortru, I think is how you say it, which I'll put the cover right here for you. And then The Well of Shades. And I'm just noticing that this is kind of odd. This is a glossy cover and this is a matte cover. And I don't know what the middle one is. This again the middle one came out when I worked at the bookstore and I got the ARC. And it was my least favorite book in the series, and I kept the ARC for a really long time, but I do remember it sort of fell apart, and I eventually had to recycle it. And it didn't have the cover art, it just had a plain white cover, so it wasn't really worth saving, but maybe I'll buy myself the hardcover to complete my collection. So this series follows Bride mostly. So we're in the land of the Picts, which is Scotland, during the time where like Christianity is starting to convert the old religion. Juliet Marillier is a druid, so she writes a lot about like ancient religion, and so like a lot of times in her books there's like animosity between ancient druids and Christianity. The first book, The Dark Mirror, feels a lot like an Arthurian legend retelling because Bride is like this ancestral king, like he's in the royal line, and he's basically taken away from court to be like hidden in the woods so no one can find him, to probably assassinate him while he's raised. So we follow him in his teen years. He's pretty young here. He has like a dream of this baby being abandoned, and then he's very young when this happens, and they save this baby, and her name is Tuala, I want to say. Yeah, it's Tuala. Yeah, Tuala. And they end up sort of being raised together. So this is sort of like a childhood friends to lovers romance while he's also in hiding so he doesn't get killed. It's very beautifully written, and like the setting descriptions are very beautiful. So I really liked this one a lot. The second one, which I don't have, The Blade of Fortru, is we have like a time jump, and now Bride is king, but there's like an impending war happening, and we follow Anna, who is a royal hostage, and she is going to be married off to this other lord who she does not want to marry because she thinks she doesn't know him, and she doesn't know if he's going to treat her well or anything. And she is escorted by Phelan, who is Bride's like mercenary basically, and they have a very like volatile relationship. Part of the reason I didn't love this one is this does end up being a love triangle, and Anna doesn't end up with who I wanted her to end up with. Which, when I tell you what the next book's about, it's going to be a spoiler. But that happens to me a lot, which is why I don't read love triangles very often, because I feel like almost always in a love triangle romance, they end up with the person I don't want them to be with. So I don't usually read them. The third book in this series, The Well of Shades, is amazing. I love this book. So we're again a time jump, and we're following Phelan, and he finds this young woman who has had horribly tragic things to happen to her. So trigger warning for like not in the moment, but past sexual assault and really horrible abuse. And it's their love story, and it's gorgeous. I don't even really remember what else is happening. I know there's like wars going on and Bride's trying to be king, but all I remember is that their love story is so beautiful, and the ending has such a great payoff for it, and it's a really, really beautiful story, The Well of Shades. My third favorite series is the Blackthorn and Grimm series, which Blackthorn and Grimm are Leaven's parents, who is in the Warrior Bird series, which is kind of a spoiler, but if you know I like reading romance, you know that I'm going to read something where they end up together. So the first book, Dreamer's Pools, sort of sets up the entire series. This is very much like an overarching series where you need to read all three, whereas some of the series that she writes, like the last one I talked about, the Bride Chronicles, you can read those sort of almost as standalones and you'll be fine. So in Dreamer's Pool, we open and Blackthorn and Grimm are both in a like disgusting prison awaiting their execution, and Blackthorn's been treated horribly, and that is a through line of her getting over her trauma that's been happening before she was imprisoned and now that she is imprisoned. A fae creature appears to them and says to Blackthorn, basically, I will trade you your life. I'll get you out of here if you give me 7 years of service. And during those years, you are not allowed to seek vengeance against the king who has imprisoned her. And she really has a hard time agreeing to this because all she wants to do is like murder the heck out of that king. And you find out throughout the series why. But she agrees, and Grimm comes with her. And there's also the caveat that if she ever starts to seek vengeance, if she gets too close to the king, she'll wake up in the prison and be executed. Because magic. So in each of these books, so the first one is Dreamer's Pool, the second one is The Tower of Thorns, and the third one is Den of Wolves. It's like a different mission that Blackthorn and Grimm are going on that has a magical element. These are sort of like fantasy mysteries, I would classify them as, because there's always something happening that you're not really sure what's going on, and you have to kind of like figure it out alongside them as to what is actually happening. This is definitely has a romantic plot, but you get no romance until like halfway through the second book, I feel like, and you don't get like any sort of, you know, like payoff until the end of the third book. So if you're looking for like a fantasy romance series, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this because you do have to wait so long. I mean, each of these books is over 400 pages. So you have to wait about close to 1,400 pages to get the romance payoff. But the fantasy mystery portions of this book, of all these books, are fantastic. Okay, my second favorite series by Juliet Marillier is the Light Isle series, which is number 1 is Wolfskin and number 2 is Fox Mask. I lent Wolfskin to my friend and then she moved across the country. So I need to buy that book because I would really like to reread it. But again, I have this like wonderful trade version that came out right around when they were first released, and I want them to match, and of course you can't find these anywhere. So, to begin, Wolfskin tells the story of Eyvind and Nessa, and Eyvind is a Viking, and he is training to be what he calls what they call a wolfskin, which is like a warrior. And he has a good friend, Summerland, and they have very different morals, and they sort of look at life in a very different way. They travel to Scotland, basically, and invade. And when there, Eyvind meets Nessa, who is a woman living there, who's a healer, and the story is their love story, but also Summerland sort of like trying to keep them apart is part of it. It's very beautiful. I really like that book a lot. I need to buy it again so I can reread it, because I would really like to read it again. I haven't read that book since probably like 2004. The next book in that series is Fox Mask, and we follow Creedy in this one, and she is Eyvind and Nessa's daughter. And it's hard to like talk about this one without giving away stuff from Wolfskin, but there is this other island that she travels to, and it's the Faroe Islands, which reading this book made me kind of obsessed with the idea of going to the Faroe Islands, and I almost went, but I didn't. For my honeymoon, I was in Iceland, but we didn't go to the Faroe Islands. But there's the map of what's going on here. So we've got the Orkney Islands, is where Nessa and Eyvind live now, and then you've got the Northern Isles, which I believe these are the Shetland Islands, and then the Lost Isles all the way up here, which are the Faroe Islands. This one has a lot of magic in it. It has a lot of fae creatures. It has a lot of like weird contracts between humans and fae. Loved it. They've got a great hero named Keeper, who's like, if you are a person who likes heroes that aren't necessarily like 100% human, you'll like this book. And lastly, the Seven Waters series is my favorite. If you are going to start reading Juliet Marillier, I really recommend starting with the Seven Waters series because it is just gorgeous. It's made up of 2 trilogies. So originally the first 3 were Daughter of the Forest, which I just recently talked about, my disgusting cover of Daughter of the Forest, Son of the Shadows, and Child of the Prophecy. There's a second trilogy, and that is Heir to Seven Waters. I am missing the second one, Seer of Seven Waters, and then the last one, Flame of Seven Waters. So, this series is fantastic. We start with Daughter of the Forest, and we follow Saruka, who is the youngest of 7 children, the only girl. She is the 7th child of a 7th son, but not the 7th son of a 7th son, which in her world is a magical thing and means like you're destined for great things. Her mother has already died by the time this takes place. She's a teenager, and her brothers are mostly like older teens and in their 20s. I can't remember how old the oldest is. This half-fae woman, Una, comes to their keep and basically puts her father under a spell to make him fall in love with her. And they can all see that she's evil, but their father cannot, because he's like totally, in love with her. And she also puts some of her brothers under spells, but not all of them. She marries their father and becomes pregnant with what could be the 7th son of a 7th son. And she curses all the boys to turn into swans. So Saruka manages to escape, and a fae woman tells her, if you want to break the curse, you need to live in the woods alone, you need to not speak, and you need to weave them shirts out of nettle, which it's not actual nettle, because actual nettle is not sharp, but basically thorns. So she lives alone in the woods trying to weave these shirts together while her hands are like disgusting and infected, and she can't talk to anyone. And the swans kind of hang out when they can, but her brothers become more and more animalistic. They can change back into their human form very occasionally. It's been a long time since I've read this book, so I can't remember if it's like on the solstices or if it's like on the full moon. I can't remember, but it's very rare that they can actually come talk to her, but they can. She gets found by a British lord, and since she can't speak, he kind of takes her in. This book is beautiful. It's such a good love story. It's such a good story. This does have a scene of very descriptive sexual assault told in first person. So I would caution anyone who is wary of reading a scene like that. If you come to it, you can just skip it. And actually, Juliet Marillier did an Ask Me Anything recently, and she said this was the first book she ever wrote, and that if she had to rewrite it now, she would have taken that scene out. She wouldn't have taken out that it happened, but she wouldn't have written it the same way. Next is Son of the Shadows, which this is my favorite book of all time. And in this book, we follow Saruka's daughter, Leodin. And she is a healer, and she gets kidnapped by a band of traveling kind of like mercenaries / warriors to be their healer because they have an injured man among them. Also in this book, we meet Neve, who's her older sister, and Sean, who's her twin, and they become important throughout the rest of the stories. This is such a beautiful, beautiful story. I love it so much. I might reread this book now that I'm thinking about it. I kind of want to reread it right now. Oh, it has such a good first line also. My mother knew every tale that was ever told by the firesides of Erin and more besides. What a beautiful first line. Juliet Marillier, you're such a good writer. The third book in the series is Child of the Prophecy, and this follows Fanya, and she is Neve's daughter, Leodin's older sister, and this has a really good map in it. Some of her books have great maps, and I just love them. And you can't really talk too much about what this book's about without giving away a huge plot point of the second book. So just know that Fanya lives sort of on the outskirts of society because of who she is, and she never feels welcome in Seven Waters among her cousins and her aunts and uncles. And her story is very sad, but also lovely, and it is a love story as well. And the cover gives not much away, but look at that cool P. Gosh. These covers, I really like these covers. I miss this type of cover. This is like my favorite. If I saw a cover illustrated like this in, 2003, I was like, I'm going to love this book. Okay, so that's the first trilogy. Now, the second trilogy has to do with the children of Sean, Leodin's twin brother, and he has something like 6 girls. He doesn't have any sons. Leodin has 4 boys, and he has 6 girls. So it's like his children are not going to inherit Seven Waters, but they all have really good stories. So first up, we have his daughter, Claudia. And if you like the folktale of the changeling, you'll really like this. Because basically what happens is there is a changeling situation, and Claudia goes into the other world to try to retrieve a child. This one also, great story, great love story with her and Cathal. The second book in this trilogy, but the 5th book in the Seven Waters series, is The Seer of Seven Waters. And this is about Sean's daughter. I think you say her name is Shebeal. It's like Sibeal. And I owned this, and it was hardcover, and I don't know who I would have lent number 5 in a series to. I think it might have been someone I went to library school with. That's the only one I can think of, because I know she read those books too. I might have lent it to her. Dang it. So in The Seer of Seven Waters, Shebeal is like really spiritual, and she's going to join this. It's not like she's not going to be a nun because she's not Christian, but basically like become a nun, but for druids, and live a solitary lifestyle, never marry, never have children. When she's on her way to this place, there's a horrible shipwreck with her and the people on the ship, and she starts taking care of this man that's very badly injured. And there's this woman and her husband where she can just tell like something really strange is going on between them, and the woman doesn't speak. And if you like sea monster stories, this is like high magic. Some of these aren't like super high magic, like, the fake creatures are there and they're like in and out, sort of how we look at like, like Irish and like British folklore, where they're like these like characters on the side. But this is like a high magic story. Like there is an actual sea monster in this story. It's very good. I liked the ending. It did have a happy ending. I might have preferred it if it had a tragic ending, just because I do kind of love romantic tragedies as well as like happy romances. But again, very good. And the last book in the Seven Waters series is The Flame of Seven Waters. And this is about Maeve, who is one of Sean's daughters. And in Child of the Prophecy, so book 3 through 6, they're all the same generation. So Fanya is Neve's daughter, and then the 3 protagonists are Sean's daughters, but they're all around the same age. And all these books take place within probably like 15 years of each other. Maybe less. No, probably less. All these books take place probably within like 7 years of each other. In Child of the Prophecy, there's a horrible fire. and Maeve is really badly burned in it. So in Flame of Seven Waters, Maeve is now, I think, like in her 20s, and she lives kind of away from society other than her family. She has her worst burns are on her hands, so it's very difficult for her to like live a normal life because of that. But she does have this affinity with animals and loves animals. And you can see there's 2 dogs on the cover who are actually really important characters in the story. So at this point, Seven Waters is sort of like in turmoil against the Fae Prince Macdara, who we do meet in Clauda's book, Heir to Seven Waters. And humans are getting murdered by Fae creatures. They keep finding their bodies near Seven Waters. And then suddenly Maeve finds these 2 dogs that feel like very otherworldly and become a huge part of the story. This is basically Maeve trying to figure out how to have peace at Seven Waters, how to maybe unseat this crazy Fae prince that's killing all these people. And her story is lovely and very good. And Juliet Marillier writes animals really well. She's like really has like a ton of dogs, and she can write. Sometimes I feel like animals in books are written really poorly, but I think she does a very good job at weaving animals in well, that they're actually like believable in the story. So that is my definitive ranking of Juliet Marillier's series. I hope that one of them is something you'd be interested in, or all of them. I definitely recommend to start with the Seven Waters series, but if you're super into YA fantasy, then you might want to start with Wildwood Dancing, or if the idea of a fantasy mystery sounds fantastic to you, give the Blackthorn and Grimm series a try. I've always kind of wondered why Juliet Marillier isn't more famous, because I think her writing is absolutely beautiful. She is not American, which might be part of it, or British. She is from New Zealand, and I think currently lives in Australia, so I don't know if that's part of the reason. I know she's very big in Australia, but her books are lovely. And if you like fantasy with a pretty strong romance, but I would categorize these as fantasy, these are books for you. I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.